Last night I had the privilege of having been specifically invited back into my old community. Uh, the My colleague at the neighboring synagogue, whom I'd welcomed to the community 17 years ago, is retiring, stepping down, and this is his congregation's last turn to host the rotating hosting of the pre-Thanksgiving Interfaith Unity Service, which I launched in 1987, and that community has done every year since. We have the two synagogues, the Catholic Church and the Methodist Church, take turns rotating, the only four congregations big enough to host a large gathering, from the 12 to 14 houses of worship, Baha'i, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, all of whom come and participate. Since he's retiring, he said, look, I'd really like it. This is my last chance to be there and to host it. I'd like you to be there because you established the whole thing and you welcomed me to the community. So I got to attend. And here's what's quirky about it. It was last night. Did I mention that? Yes, I did going in. You got lost in the preamble. I did say that. And that's what's quirky about it is that originally we established this in 1987 on the Wednesday right before Thanksgiving. And after a couple of years decided, well, there's so many people who would like to participate but are already on their way over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house. So we moved it to the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. For many, many, many years, and evidently a couple of years back, I'm now out of the community, they decided to move it to the Thursday night a week before Thanksgiving. Well, which is fine. Go ahead and ask me why. I'm glad you asked, for two reasons. First of all, it is the pre-Thanksgiving unity service. So with tongue-in-cheek, it doesn't matter how far back you move it. But secondly, Thanksgiving itself is a fluid date. Ever since we're little kids in school, we make a fuss about the first, capital T, the capital F, first Thanksgiving in 1621, where the English pilgrims rejoiced with their Indian neighbors. Except we don't know why we're doing it when we're doing it, because they did it in October over a course of 3 days. Thanksgiving is fluid. The second Thanksgiving was 1678, rejoicing with the death of their Indian neighbors, the conclusion of King Philip's War when they brought in the head of the chief Metacom and proclaimed the day of sacred holy Thanksgiving. Only on one day, not three, and it was in June. How about a national Thanksgiving, the way we do it now? It was proclaimed by George Washington once in 1789, and no one remembers what day it was or what month. It was formalized by Abraham Lincoln in 1863. And in the program we put together for worship experience for our pre-Thanksgiving unity service, we always began by having the mayors of our two cities tag team on reading the presidential proclamation signed by Abraham Lincoln, which called for a national day of Thanksgiving in October of 1863 to be observed on the last Thursday of the ensuing month of November. Just that one year, 1863. He intended it as a gesture to unite the nation in the middle of the Civil War. And that year, the last Thursday happened to be the fourth Thursday. After Lincoln was killed, several of his admirers tried and lobbied for decades, literally decades, to make his Thanksgiving feast in November an annual event. And it wasn't really adopted till the 1880s. And wasn't standardized on the fourth Thursday until 1941 under President Roosevelt. Go ahead, ask me why. Because the feeling was if we stick with the last Thursday in November, there will be years where that starts to cut into the Christmas shopping season. Hence, Black Friday goes back a long way. Now, my point in broaching all this irrelevant arcana, and I am the first one to acknowledge it is both arcane and irrelevant. But my point in broaching it isn't because I want you to have the machinery to come up with a final Jeopardy question. The first Thanksgiving celebrated our union with the Indians. The second Thanksgiving celebrated having killed off the Indians. Now, it's not another calendar lesson, and it's not another history lesson. Rather, it is a reflection on the fluidity of time. If you can do Thanksgiving anywhere, October, November, June, fourth Thursday, last Thursday, or in this case of my community, together for the sake of interfaith a week before. It's about the fluidity of time. Think about President's Day. Everyone here is old enough to remember when you had Lincoln's birthday on February 12th and Washington's birthday on February 22nd, or as we say in the Talmud, bismano, on their appropriate respective dates. But somewhere in the 1970s, they said instead of having two isolated federal holidays 10 days apart, let's split the difference and create a 3-day weekend right in between. The fluidity of time. I couldn't even begin to tell you the date of Martin Luther King's birthday, but when it was established as a federal holiday, they created a 3-day weekend on the closest Monday. We do the same thing in the Jewish tradition. Scripture tells us that after the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem in the summer of 586, the small population that was left behind and not taken away into exile to the waters of Babylon was led by a Babylonian appointed trustee, a Jewish leader and recognized leader named Gedaliah. Great name, the greatness of the Lord. But there were Jewish patriots running around wearing hats saying, "Make Judea great," who saw this Jew collaborating with the Babylonians as just that, a collaborator. And so when the whole Jewish community that was left several weeks after the destruction of the temple in the summer of 586 BCE got together a few weeks later for Rosh Hashanah, the well-intentioned right-wingers assassinated Gedaliah, which gave a signal to the Babylonians that the Jews can't be trusted to manage their own affairs, and the rest were taken away exile. He was our last great chance for some semblance of normality, keeping an anchor and a link to draw us back home eventually. And so the death of Gedaliah is observed as a fast day, but here's the problem. When was it he was killed? Rosh Hashanah. Does that mean we're going to drop Rosh Hashanah and have a fast day for Gedaliah? So we moved the fast of Gedaliah to the day after Rosh Hashanah, except then the Talmud establishes the principle that for Jewish communities outside the land of Israel, all of our holidays have a second day, a reprise. So the fast of Gedaliah is now observed on the 3rd of Tishrei because time is fluid. Second book of Kings does tell us that the Babylonian imperial officer arrived to supervise the destruction of Jerusalem. He arrived in the month of Av, I think on the 5th, but don't quote me. The next day, his military staff gave him a briefing on the ground. And the next day, per his instructions, they began dismantling the temple in Jerusalem. We're not told it was the 9th of Av. But since the Romans burned the second temple on the 9th of Av, we blur past the ambivalence in the scriptural account to say both the first and second temple was destroyed on the same day. The fluidity of time. And in modernity, the parliament of the newborn state of Israel resolved, we, as a reborn Jewish nation, the third Jewish Commonwealth, should have a national day of remembrance for the victims of the Nazi genocide. Yom HaShoah, the day of remembering the disaster. And they said, and when should it be? They said the Nazis were butchering Jews wholesale for 10 years in a kingdom of death. Pick a day, any day. And they said, let us pick a date halfway between Passover, which is the birth of the Jewish people, and Yom HaAtzmaut, which is the rebirth of the Jewish people. And so the date in the middle is the 27th of Nisan, 12 days after Passover, which is Yom HaShoah. That highlights not just how fluid our time is, but more important, what matters is not so much the date as our assigning a date, whenever it is. because of what doing so says about us. In today's society, between the influence of the United Nations and its member nations, and just in general, there's lots of occasions designated throughout the calendar. There's a National Children's Day. There's a World Cancer Day, a World Day for Water, a World Day for Social Justice, a World Refugee Day, an International Day of the world's indigenous peoples, an International Day for the abolition of slavery and human trafficking, an International Day against corruption, an International Day in support of victims of torture. These are compelling considerations in which the human family is going on record as being opposed to certain horrific things and partners in advocacy for others that matter profoundly to us all. Now, there are plenty of lighthearted occasions as well. My family is particularly fond of Pi Day. That's pi without an E in it. The Greek mathematical constant, pi, which is observed on, guess when? March 14th, which you observe by eating something round, either pizza or apple, pie, but a pie nonetheless. There's Mole Day, which is more arcane. Celebration of Avogadro's constant on October 23rd. My observation is you only observe it at 6:02 a.m. and 6:02 p.m. because Avogadro's constant is 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd power, and you observe it by eating guacamole. There is in May a national 2 different colored shoes day. There is a Talk Like a Pirate Day in September, and the Hot Pastrami Sandwich Day on January 14th, which was established under the influence of hot pastrami, which is a very big lobby in Washington. We have lighthearted and goofy things. Several of these, frankly, were created by elementary school teachers who need to brighten up the bleakness of the cold, dark winter months by having fun stuff in the schools. We have goofy things. National Open an Umbrella Indoors Day. We have serious, urgently important things. But what matters is this. These are ways of acting on our priorities by demonstrating what our priorities are in the first place. There would not be an international day for the abolition of slavery if slavery did not very much still exist in our world. And any of us who've had occasion to run back and forth across the strait on I-75 to get to and from Marco Island can attest that when you stop in at the state-sponsored rest stop, there are placards in English and Spanish urging people who are the victims of human trafficking and slave labor to contact the number and get support. These days on the calendar, wherever they may be put fluidly, speak of our priorities. Next week, we speak of our priorities as a nation of faith, giving thanks for our numerous blessings and bounties. But so many other days of the year are days that speak about what our priorities are. Our Torah portion tells us this week how Rebecca marries, and last week we looked into possibilities of how old she may have been at the time and decided it didn't matter, because lacking empirical evidence to the contrary, we'd have no way of knowing. But we're told this week that after 20 years, she's still childless. We're told that she then deals with the pregnancy when it occurs. Troubling and complicated pregnancy caused primarily with the fact that she has 2 twins in her womb. She's a small girl with 2 big babies who, mitrotzitzim, are running around inside her. And she places her priorities on the one whom God chooses, setting a pattern for all of biblical life where the eldest, the firstborn, is never the one in charge. God told her while pregnant, 2 nations are within your womb, and the elder shall be servant to the younger. Rebecca is our template for this idea of the fluidity of time. It's not a question of when it happens. It's what it is that you do when it matters. She's waited 20 years to have the twins. She deals with the pregnancy when it occurs. She places her priorities on the one that God has chosen. My prayer would be, friends, that we be as fluid as the time dictates, but as firm in our convictions about what it is that God dictates to us. Shabbat Shalom.